Well, it's time to take a quick look at what's grabbing the headlines here in France. And joining me is Florence Villemot.
Hey, Julia.
Hey, how are you, Flo?
I'm all right. How are you?
Okay, so we're starting here in the European Union, where the spotlight is on the EU. It's day 2 of their EU summit. Let's talk about the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome, which is kind of the seed out of which,
Everything else happened.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
right. And that birthday is a couple of weeks away, so lots of French papers are focusing on the state of the European Union. Let's start with Le Figaro that says the European Union is powerless. It can't seem to overcome the shock that was Brexit. It's looking for a second wind. Now, inside, Le Figaro takes a closer look and says an old idea is coming back on the table, and that is of a European Union that works at 2 speeds. You have different degrees of integration, some with more, some with less, kind of a Europe à la carte, if you will. There would be a central nugget, which would be Germany, France, Spain, and Italy, and then all sorts of other countries on the periphery. But as you can see here, Le Figaro says, even though a lot of countries are talking about this idea, they're quite divided over the details of this several-speed Europe.
Right.
It's a touchy subject, though, and critics say that for the European Union to act as a united front, how would that work if not all the members are on the same page? You can see here, La Croix, their editorial says that actually, it's not that big a deal. Europe can be, on the one hand, divided, if you will, but at the same time united. It's kind of an interesting idea here in their editorial, and it says that, look, the future of Europe lies in the capacity of a majority of countries working together, all the while keeping this space, this continental space where there would be a common market and a democratic space where people could circulate freely.
Right. Okay. Well, moving on to pro-business, pro-European paper L'Opinion, which agrees on. Actually, tell us more about that.
Well, let's take a look at their editorial. They go even further. They agree with what La Croix was saying and Le Figaro as well, saying, look, 60 years after the Treaty of Rome, it appears that the EU is out of shape and unpopular. What the EU needs is a shot of youth. And you can see they have an interesting idea here. What the EU needs is a bad word that starts with an F. Now, it's not the one you're thinking about. The one they're thinking about is a federation. The EU needs to become a federation, essentially a federation of nation states. And once again, L'Opinion says this is actually an old idea that has been coming up time and time again, but now it's time to actually implement this idea of a federation in Europe.
Okay, well, let's move on now to French politics. And far-right National Front leader Marine Le Pen is back in the spotlight after she was summoned by a judge over these fake job scandals.
That's right, but she says she's not going to go see that judge, and that's what French papers are focusing on today. Let's take a look at the front page of Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien. Now, Marine Le Pen is using her parliamentary immunity, so her European parliamentary immunity, kind of like a get-out-of-jail-free card in Monopoly. You can see this photo of a very smiley Marine Le Pen, but Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien is critical of her because time and time again, Marine Le Pen has given lessons. She's lashed out against the privilege of, the privileged elite that can get away with anything. And yet here she is using her parliamentary immunity to get out of this fake job scandal at the European Parliament. She's thumbing her nose at the justice system. And so you can see Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien saying, do what I say, not what I do.
Well, I think that's a bit of a familiar tune that's, we're hearing from the French political elite. Tell us more about what Le Parisien is saying.
Well, Marine Le Pen says that she's a victim here. And she says that, all this is just a scheme to upset her race for the Élysée Palace, which, remember, is 6 weeks away. Now, that, of course, sounds very familiar because that's exactly what François Fillon, the conservative candidate, is also saying about this fake job scandal that's dogging his campaign. Now, this is, of course, the so-called Penelope Gate scandal that's really caused François Fillon to tumble in the polls. But Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien takes a closer look and says what's interesting is Fillon is being negatively impacted by his scandal, but it seems like Marine Le Pen's scandal is just rolling off her back. Why is that? Well, you can see a quote here from Joseph, 53 years old. His opinion is shared by a lot of people. what's happening to Marine Le Pen isn't as serious as what's happening to François Fillon. And why is that? Well, it's because it's talking about Europe. It's not talking about France. But Le Parisien, Aujourd'hui en France, in its editorial says, look, just because Marine Le Pen, is talking about the European Parliament in Strasbourg, we're not talking about national issues, it's still our money. We're still talking about taxpayers' money. Nos euros, our money. And so it's kind of weird that she's getting away with this while François Fillon is being dogged by his scandal.
But I mean, even despite that, she still needs to draw strong support, so close to the elections.
Absolutely. And she's getting a lot of support from the working class. And these are people who traditionally voted for the far left. Let's take a look at L'Opinion on their front page. You can see that this is actually quite a headache for trade unions. They're completely lost and disoriented by the attraction that many of their members feel to the far-right National Front. And you see that teeny little cartoon there. I'll describe what's happening. You can see Marine Le Pen on a date with Philippe Martinez. Philippe Martinez is the leader of the CGT trade union, which is traditionally a far-left union. It looks kind of like an uncomfortable date, and Marine Le Pen, with her phone in her hand, says, well, according to Tinder, we're 80% compatible.
And tell us more about the socialist candidate, Benoît Hamon. He's still really flailing a bit, getting his campaign off the ground hasn't been as easy.
It hasn't been as easy. Now, yesterday he appeared on TV. He gave a really long interview about his program. It's his moment of truth, according to Libération. He has 10 days to inverse his current downward curve. You can see a photo of him there, looking forward, perhaps, for inspiration. Now, there is one thing that's playing in his favor, and that is that he has not been on the airwaves that much. And what you need to know about France is it has an egalitarian view when it comes to a candidate's access to mass media. By law, all candidates are given equal time on the television and on the radio during the campaign period. And there's actually a special watchdog that counts each and every second that a candidate is on air or a candidate is spoken about. You can see the times here that are accumulated for each candidate. You can see Benoît Hamon, he's in fourth place. He's way behind the other candidates. Of course, François Fillon, we've been talking a lot about him because of the scandal. He's got 265 hours over the last month. So you can see Benoît Hamon is behind, so he's going to have an opportunity to have his word said.
Well, thank you very much for that, Flo. We're running out of time here, but I'm just going to say a quick goodbye. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stay tuned. Don't go away.